Can you hear me, Mom?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I'm not gonna be able to flip my pages. I just want to say thank you for everyone that came. My mom and my sisters and brother-in-law and a bunch of people from New Covenant Church in Port Arthur, which is my home church. And Jim is here. And my sponsor, Nancy. I don't think any of my CR people have ever met my sponsor, Nancy. Say hi. Nancy, I'm Helen. I called you Nancy. I called you Nancy the first time I met you, and that came out of my mouth. My sponsor's name is Helen.
I like Nancy.
Okay, I'll call you Nancy Helen.
She gets it from my
Oh
mother.
my goodness.
You get it from mom. Big name.
Yeah. Okay. Let me start over. I'm gonna go back and sit down. I am a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. I'm celebrating recovery from alcoholism, food addiction, anxiety, depression, and a lot of self-pity. And my name is Delena. I was born in Longview, Texas. My dad was a Baptist preacher, and my mom stayed at home with us most of my childhood. Then later, she became a constant presence of peace and love at our local grocery store. My dad's mom was a Sunday school teacher, and his dad was a deacon in the church. My mom's parents and brother, however, smoked and drank a lot, and as far as I know, they didn't go to church. My mom was somehow protected from all of that, and she is one of the most genuine Christian women I've ever known. At this time, I had one older sister named Rhonda, who was my best friend most of the time. When I was 3 years old, we moved to Orange, where my dad pastored another Baptist church. Then when I was 5 years old, right after my little sister Tina was born, we moved to Port Arthur, where most of my family still lives. Tina took my place as the baby of the family, and that left me being the middle child. And we all know what that means. I was oversensitive, felt invisible, and I wanted attention. We grew up in the church. We were there all the time. Sunday school, church, choir, and youth group. I never heard my parents say a bad word. They never drank or smoked, and I wasn't exposed to anyone who did. I got saved and baptized when I was 7 years old. I always believed in God. I knew that He loved me and I loved Him. Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." When I was 10 years old, my little brother was born. He was the most beautiful 10-pound, blue-eyed baby boy I had ever seen. I claimed him as my baby. Now there were 4 of us, and Mom had her hands full, carpooling kids everywhere. We loved to visit our neighbors, go to friends' houses, and play outside until dark. I really had a great childhood. I had amazing parents. We all knew that we were loved. Everyone in our community knew Brother Wolf and constantly reminded me that I was a preacher's kid. Just a few years later, when I was 12, things started to change. I started hanging out with the wrong people, and I made some bad decisions that led me down a dark path. This is when I first remember feeling shame and guilt. I heard that still small voice telling me that I was making bad choices, but I ignored it. I knew right from wrong, but I guess I wanted to prove that a preacher's kid wasn't automatically perfect. I know my parents could tell that I was changing. My whole attitude changed. I was defiant and disobedient. A friend introduced me to cigarettes and then beer. They both made me feel terrible, but for some reason I did it anyway. I remember that even though I could feel I was changing in a negative way, I hated the sneaking and lying. I still wanted more. 1 Peter 5:8 says, "Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour." One of my friends had older relatives that would let us come over and they would let us stay all weekend, and they would let us drink and smoke as much as we wanted to. We felt grown up. It was fun, and I loved the feeling of being drunk, but I hated the guilt feelings when I went home or to church. I wish I had listened to that still small voice, but I didn't. We kept going back as often as we could. My parents trusted me, and I knew that I was letting them down. I remember sitting on the couch very drunk, surrounded by people, unable to move, but I could hear them talking. Everyone there except me and my friend were in their 20s. I heard one of the girls say, "That poor little girl, y'all shouldn't let her drink anymore." I felt embarrassed, but I couldn't do anything about it. One of the older guys that was always there started waiting until I was drunk, and then he would kiss me, touch me inappropriately, and force me to touch him. I wanted to go there with my friend because I felt grown up. I was free from rules, but I hated when he showed up. He always trapped me and got me alone. I was just a kid. I knew nothing about grown-up things. I was innocent, other than the drinking, smoking, and lying. But this guy threw me into adult shame and guilt and abuse that I never knew existed. He was married, and I didn't understand why he wouldn't leave me alone. He told me that if I told anyone, they would blame me. I should have told my parents, but I didn't know how. Thankfully, I got up the courage to tell my friend, and we decided not to go there anymore. However, the damage had been done in my mind. I took on all of the blame. The guilt I carried was horrible. I felt like I didn't deserve love. I thought all men just wanted to hurt me, use me, or treat me like an object. I didn't think that God could love me anymore. I didn't drink all the time, but every time I was around alcohol, I didn't know how to stop. I had a loving, happy home. My parents were great. My siblings got on my nerves sometimes, but I loved them. It was my heart that was hurt. I was miserable inside, and I didn't know how to tell anyone. I always felt like something was missing, like I was searching aimlessly for a cure to my pain. I needed more of everything. I wanted to drink more, smoke more. I wanted more things. I wanted to be skinnier. I wanted to be prettier. Nothing satisfied the pain I had inside. I had a God-sized hole that I was trying to fill with everything but God. I was hiding because I was ashamed. I went from boyfriend to boyfriend for a few years. I would fall madly in love, and then they would get on my nerves and I would drop them. When I was 15, I got into my first serious relationship. He wasn't who I was looking for, but I loved how much he loved me. He quickly became very jealous, which was probably my fault, but I always felt like I was doing something wrong. Again, I felt like I didn't deserve to be trusted or treated with respect. I didn't see it then, but I know God put him in my life. We had a lot to work through, but I can see now that he was a gift. Even though we had to go through a lot of hard times, he was and still is my best friend and has always taken care of me. So now I was 15, dealing with a jealous, controlling boyfriend. My 16-year-old sister got pregnant. My parents were very angry. Our home was in turmoil, and things were going crazy at my dad's church. I don't know all the details, but there was a vote to keep him or make him leave. There was so much fighting. People that we loved were being mean to my dad, saying horrible things. I didn't understand why. He won the vote, but not by much. He decided to leave and start a new church. We moved into an old house that needed major repairs. We had no money and no church. We started meeting in a closed-down Western wear store that a friend of his owned. Everything in my life was turned upside down. I had no control over any of it. Most of the time, I just wanted to disappear. I would go weeks without eating little more than broth. Then I would eat everything in sight until I got sick. I lost a lot of weight, and people would tell me how good I looked. and that felt good. It got worse and worse, and I started to look sick. I had dark circles under my eyes, and I was way too thin. I was miserable. Food became a drug to me. I ate nothing, or I ate everything and purged. All I remember about life from 15 to 18 is self-induced misery. I don't remember going to church. I don't remember going on dates. I don't remember much about school. I don't remember having fun. I wanted more alcohol, more food, more attention. I just wanted to feel different. So I got married when I was 18. I thought leaving home would fix everything. Of course it didn't, because I was the problem. About a year after we were married, I wanted to have a baby. Something to love me and something that I could love and love me back. Having a baby would fix everything, right? We had our first son, Sean, right before I turned 20. I loved being pregnant. I couldn't drink alcohol anymore, and I could eat whatever I wanted. I gained 80 pounds, and that left me feeling fat and ugly. I loved our son. I loved being a mom, but my depression was still there. We decided not to allow alcohol in our house. We tried to set a good example for our son. We would pray every night and sing songs from church. Richie and I started singing on the praise team, and things seemed to be going pretty well. We were a happy little family for a while. I opened a home daycare so that I could stay home with Sean, and that's a whole other story. One of my kids is here tonight, Taylor. It's one of my babies. She was a little baby. I soon got pregnant again with our middle son, Caleb. Then 8 months later, with Judah. I loved being a mom, but I was young and had no clue what I was doing. We did our best, but we made some bad decisions. We started going out more and more, drinking on the weekends when we could get a babysitter. And every time I drank way too much, and I was so embarrassed to walk in the house. We had put God on the back burner. Our marriage became rocky. We were headed for divorce. I just wanted to be happy, but I couldn't find anything that would do it. I felt the best when I couldn't feel anything. In 1999, we moved to Alabama for a new job and a fresh start. The boys were all in elementary school. We decided we were going to go back to church and get our lives back on track. We weren't there for more than a few weeks, and we met some people that liked to drink, and we were sucked right back in. I didn't know how to stay away. My biggest regret, the hardest thing to accept forgiveness for, is putting my boys in danger. I left my 3 boys, all under 12 years old, at our apartment complex alone for the weekend so we could go to Florida with our new drinking buddies. When I think back on the stupidity, it makes my skin crawl. I thank God every day for protecting my boys when I couldn't. We were there for about a year, and Richie got laid off, so we headed back to Texas. When we moved to Conroe, I think it was the first time I remember buying alcohol and hiding it in the kitchen. I was soon hiding it in my car, in the closets, and sometimes at work. I drank on my way home from work and drove drunk more times than I can remember, sometimes with my kids in the car. That was the beginning of my downward spiral. I started drinking almost every day, but no one knew it at first. I had gotten a job at a country club a few months after we moved to Conroe and made a lot of friends. All of them drank, so we had a lot of parties. Everything we did involved drinking. We had a lot of fun for a while, but I was still miserable inside. I was always searching for that next thing that was going to make me happy. I was a liar and a fake. I alienated myself from my parents and siblings, and I thought I was hiding from God. It seemed like everyone in my family except me was living for God. Even my little brother, who liked to drink and party, had turned his life around. It was just me now, the black sheep. I felt like I wasn't part of the family anymore. I didn't fit in. I was broken. I had no one to talk to. I did, but I was hiding from them. Thank God they never stopped praying for me. In 2008, the country club was sold and I had to look for a new job. I found a job at a chemical company, but I hated it. I kept a bottle of vodka with me all the time. I drank on my way home, and then I drank until I passed out after dinner. This is about the time I crossed the line of abusing alcohol to needing it to function. My boys were all in their teens now, and Sean had started to really get in trouble. I worried about him constantly. I was depressed, sad, lonely, and hated everything about my life. Richie traveled a lot for work. Sean went into the Marines, and Kaylin and Judah moved out and got an apartment. I felt like everyone was leaving me. My purpose was gone. I would sit in the closet drinking and crying over baby pictures for days. I was alone. My marriage was falling apart, and I was drinking more than I ever had. I was offered a job closer to home, so I took it. God put a lady in my life when I first moved here named Susie. We worked together for 8 years at the country club, and then again at my new job. She prayed for me all the time. She knew that I loved God, but she also knew that I wasn't living right. On about my second day on that job, I realized they had a cabinet full of liquor in the kitchen that was left over from a party. This may not have been a big deal to some people, but it called my name all day. When everyone left the office, I would sneak in the kitchen and take a drink just to stop the shakes. I'm sure Susie probably smelled the alcohol on my breath, but she never said a word. She didn't judge me and she didn't preach to me. She left me right where I was, and she prayed for me. Anytime I needed to talk to God, I went to Susie because I could see God through her. After I had been there about a year, I got laid off. I decided to stay home for a while and do a little traveling with Richie. This was not a good idea. Drinking became my full-time job. I drank when I woke up. I did as much housework as I could before I got too drunk, and then I would take a nap. Then I would drink more until I passed out. I had liquor hidden in my closet and drawers and everywhere I thought Richie wouldn't find it. He always did, though. The only time I tried to sober up was to drive to get more liquor. I lost myself, and I didn't care anymore. Richie finally realized how much I was drinking. He started watching me and got mad at me constantly because I couldn't control myself. I would promise to stop, but I could never do it for very long. I would always go right back to it. I wanted to save my marriage, and I thought if I could stay sober long enough to go out and have fun, I could get Richie to join me drinking. We started going out to clubs 3 or 4 nights a week, hanging out with people that were not just drinking, but they were also doing drugs, and some were even selling them. Thank God I never tried any, or this would be a much worse story. I don't remember most of this period of my life. I was blackout drunk most of the time. I had flashes of things I said, things I did, and so many regrets. I had let my morals get so low that I didn't care about myself anymore or anyone else. This was the darkest time of my life. I was drinking so much that I got to the point where I couldn't even get out of bed long enough to go out. Anytime we went anywhere, I was miserable. I would start shaking if I went too long without alcohol. I tried over and over to quit on my own. I would lay on the couch and shake and sweat for days. My life now revolved around how I was going to get my next drink. In April of 2010, I got very sick. My stomach hurt and I couldn't hold any food or liquid down. I was dehydrated and in serious pain. I thought I had a stomach virus, so I went to the hospital and they did an ultrasound on my stomach. The doctor asked me how much I drank. He said I had pancreatitis, one of the worst cases he had seen. The normal enzyme level is 300 and mine was at 12,000. This means my pancreas was basically trying to digest itself. The only cure is to let it rest, no food or liquid for about 8 days. The doctor told me that I could never drink alcohol again. The thought of that scared me to death. I didn't know how to function without it anymore. I laid in the hospital bed full of pain medicine, trying to figure out how I was going to live without alcohol. We had a trip scheduled to go to Mexico for our 25th anniversary. We had already paid for the trip, and it would be wasteful to stay home. Our plane left the day after I got out of the hospital. I had planned on not drinking, but as soon as we walked into our resort, someone offered me a glass of champagne, and I took it. I drank the entire time we were there and took whatever pain medicine they gave me. My intentions were to quit as soon as we got back, but of course I didn't. I drunk Googled how to quit drinking, and I saw that all the recovery programs were about giving it to God. I started crying. God won't help me. I felt hopeless. I went to a rehab, ready to check in, and they asked if I had ever had it. One of the questions was, have you ever had an eating disorder? I told them that I did, and they said they were not equipped to help people with alcohol and food addiction, so they sent me away. I felt defeated and rejected and beyond help, and that was all I needed to continue my path of destruction. I got even worse. Richie called from out of town, and I wouldn't talk. He called an ambulance to come pick me up because I told him I didn't care if I died. I was angry and so hopeless. The doctor tried to keep me in the hospital. My blood alcohol level was 0.4, and I was fully aware. My pancreas was inflamed again, but I refused treatment. My depression was getting worse, and I totally isolated myself from friends and family. No one but Richie really knew how bad I was. He did call my sister Tina one time when I was drunk and said, I don't know what to do with your sister. She talked to me and prayed with me, but I was so ashamed. I know the prayers of my family is why I'm still alive today. I remember laying on the couch, drunk, and my dad called me. I didn't answer because I knew I would slur. God was probably telling him that I was in trouble. I know he prayed for me that day. My last drunk lasted about 3 days. Richie was out of town for work, and I drank the entire time. He worried about me constantly. I don't even know if I ate any food. The night before he came home, I sat in my bathroom crying. I was so tired of feeling like a failure. I hated who I had become. I searched the whole house for a key to the safe where Richie kept his gun. While I was looking for the key, I found an old rusty razor blade and decided that was good enough. I was basically numb. How hard could it be? I got in the bathtub and I held it to my wrist, and I pushed as hard as I could, but I couldn't break the skin. I believed that God was protecting me from myself. I screamed, I cried, I yelled. I was defeated. I had flashes of my kids finding me in a pool of blood. I felt the heartbreak from Richie, our boys, and my family. I believed that the Holy Spirit was sitting in that bathtub with me. The creator of the universe came and found me. He heard my cries. Psalms 18:3-6 says, I called to the Lord who is worthy of praise, and I have been saved from my enemies. The cords of death entangled me. The torrents of destructions overwhelmed me. The cords of the grave coiled around me. The snares of death confronted me. In my distress, I called to the Lord. I cried to my God for help. From his temple, he heard my voice. My cry came before him, even into his ears. Sorry, I'm having trouble seeing. I loved my family more than anything. I was willing to try something different for them. The boys didn't even know how bad I was. I was so afraid of them finding out. I got out of the bathtub and laid across the bed and cried my eyes out. When Richie came home, I was still drunk, laying on the bed crying. He yelled at me and told me he wasn't going to sit around and watch me kill myself. He didn't know that I was just trying to do that less than an hour ago. He was going to leave me. I said, if you leave me here alone, I will die. I promise I'll get help tomorrow. Please give me one more chance. When I woke up the next day, I started looking for a place to go. I was scared to death. I didn't know how to live without drinking anymore. On November 8th, 2011, I found a place called The Right Step. I got an appointment for that afternoon. Jim Patterson told me he could get me sober, and that gave me a glimmer of hope, something I had not had in a very long time. I didn't know how he planned on doing it, but I believed him. He told me I needed to go to detox for a week. I was scared, but so ready. I went straight home to pack. I went in my closet to get a suitcase, and I found a full bottle of vodka that I had obviously hidden from myself. I held it, and I said, I have a decision to make. I can have one last buzz, or I can pour it out. I couldn't bear one more disappointed look on my husband's face. I walked to the sink. I took the lid off, and as I poured it out, I said, God, you're going to have to do this for me. I know I can't quit on my own. Please take this from me. From that moment until this day, I have not had one craving for alcohol.
Praise God.
Not one. Jeremiah 29:11-12 says, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. I went to detox for 4 days. I was happy and at peace. I got out of detox on 11/11/11. We drove straight to my dad's 70th birthday party. It was my first happy experience in a very long time. Today is my dad's birthday. I got to be with my family and really enjoy it. I wasn't shaking, and I didn't want to leave and get a drink. When I got home, I started my outpatient program. I learned so much about the effect that alcohol has on the brain and the body. I made lifelong friends, and I loved being sober. They required me to go to a 12-step program to keep me sober. I got a sponsor, and I started working the steps right away. I threw myself into recovery. It was my new job. I decided to get rid of all the old ideas I had in my head of the punishing, vengeful God that I thought could never love me. I embraced the God of love, forgiveness, and healing. I learned how to surrender my will and my life to God. Then came the hard part. Life still happens. When I'd been sober almost a year, Sean came home from the Marines with a severe drinking problem. He was fighting his own battles with alcohol. This was a true test. He kept bringing alcohol into my house. I knew what he was going through, but I didn't know how to help him. I couldn't make him get sober. I cried, I worried, I got angry, and of course none of those things did any good. When I finally decided to let go and trust that God would take care of him, things started to change. The women in recovery rallied around me and helped me through this time. God already had a plan for Sean's life, but he had to make the decision on his own to get sober, and I had to make him leave. I had to focus on my own sobriety and let God do his job. I prayed for him harder than I've ever prayed before. The day before he finally surrendered, I had not seen or heard from him in almost a week. I texted him a number to Interfaith Disciple House and told him to call if he needed help. I prayed for him day and night. The next day, Chris called me and said Sean was ready to get help. I dropped to my knees and I thanked God for saving my son's life. There's no greater joy than knowing that your child is safe. I learned to trust God's timing. I learned the power of prayer, and I had an absolute knowing instead of just a belief. My relationship with God was strengthened. I have a new respect for my husband, and our marriage gets better every day. I trust God in every area of my life. I trust that God can and will take care of us, our children, and our grandchildren that I never would have known before. I trust that God has a plan for my life and will use everything that I went through for good. He is molding me into the wife, mother, grandmother, daughter, sister, and friend that I was always meant to be. When I was a few years sober, I got to give my testimony at my dad's church. He had not heard my story and really didn't even know the extent of my drinking. I had been very good at hiding. Dad wanted me to talk about what God had done in Sean's life, but God had other plans. It was one of the best experiences of my sobriety. He told me he was proud of me. He said he had never stopped praying for me, and I'll do the same for my own kids and grandkids. My daddy loved God, and he was an example to all of us of how to be of service, love others, and always put God first. None of us listened for a very long time. But Dad got to see all of us serving God before he went home to be with Jesus in 2018. And for that, I am truly grateful. When Richie was out of town a few years ago, I decided to look for a new church to get involved with. God led me to Church Project, and I got reconnected with one of my drinking buddies that had also quit drinking and going out. She had been going to Church Project for about a year or so, and we started going to celebrate recovery together. My relationship with Jesus has grown every day that I've been sober. Through working the steps, I've learned to let go of my past mistakes, give my life to God every day, and be of service to Him and others every opportunity I get. In one of our lessons a few weeks ago, I heard for the first time that I can't forgive myself. God's already forgiven me. Jesus paid the price. All I have to do is accept His forgiveness. His grace is sufficient. I am powerless over my addiction, and in my own power, my life is unmanageable. I choose every morning to commit all of my life and will to Christ's care and control. Psalms 51:10 through 12 says, "Create in me a new heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me from your presence or take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me." I talk to my sponsor. I talk to other people in recovery every day, and I try to keep my side of the street clean. And I'm available anytime I can be of service. My favorite time of day now is when I first wake up. I go to my prayer closet and I have an hour to read my devotions, read my Bible, and pray. His mercy is new every morning. I am refreshed and fueled for the day. I learned how to pray for other people. I love seeing God work in people's lives. I've seen so many miracles in recovery. The program works if you work it. It changed my life. I have a relationship with Jesus, and I have peace and love and joy in my heart and in my home. 1 year ago, I had asked Pastor Matt if he would consider having a recovery group at our church. I didn't realize that I would be running it, but I'm so honored to be able to serve and celebrate recovery. I'm overjoyed that my husband and my son are serving alongside me. I don't feel like I'm worthy of leading a ministry, but I know God never calls the qualified. He qualifies the called. Amen. I am willing to serve, and I ask God for guidance, wisdom, and knowledge of His will and the power to carry it out. I love being able to carry the message of healing to others who are hurting. Jesus is the answer. Isaiah 41:10. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be anxious or look about you, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Surely I will help you. Surely I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. God works miracles every day. I'm one of them, and so are you. Thank you for letting me share.